My name is James Keller. I was 32 years old when this all went down, and I want you to imagine something with me. You've given everything to the uniform. Sleepless nights, broken relationships, time you'll never get back. And then one day, the man who's supposed to lead you, the one who wears the same rank, breathes the same air, he just stops showing up. Not for a day, not for a weekend, but for almost 2 damn weeks. He blames you for his failures. He leaves his soldiers hanging, and he thinks his rank makes him untouchable. But in the Army, we don't run from accountability. We build it, one wall at a time. This isn't just a story of revenge. It's a story of precision, of soldiers who got pushed too far and pushed back harder. If you've ever wanted to watch karma hit with military-grade discipline, buckle up. Because this commander, we erased him from existence. I'd been in the Army long enough to know how bad leadership spreads, like black mold behind drywall. Quiet at first, almost invisible. But if you don't tear it out fast enough, it rots everything around it. At the time, I was serving as the executive officer, XO, for Alpha Company. 32 years old, 2 deployments behind me, and a belief that leadership, real leadership, was earned in sweat, not handed out with a rank. Our battalion operated out of a concrete tomb of a building, windowless, echoing, and cold in the way only Army buildings are. It housed the offices for 4 companies, 4 long hallways, each one a little universe of stress, paperwork, caffeine, and the occasional chaos bomb. Across the hall from me was Bravo Company. Their XO, let's call him Mike, was a good friend of mine. Quiet guy, quick wit, but sharp as a bayonet when he needed to be. He was the kind of officer who gave a damn. The kind who made you believe the system might still work if we could just get the right people in charge. But Bravo Company had a problem, and that problem had a name. Captain Leonard Briggs, their commander, a man who somehow failed upward. He had all the trademarks of a bad officer. He was lazy, he was rude, and worst of all, he blamed his own soldiers for every one of his screw-ups. Missed reports? Ops screwed me. Failed inspections? My NCOs didn't follow through. His go-to move? Disappear. He'd vanish for entire days with no warning, no accountability. He'd show up whenever he damn well pleased, if at all, then throw his people under the bus to cover his own ass. And for the longest time, nobody did anything about it. Why? Because people like Briggs are experts at gaming the system. They smile when the colonel walks by, show up just enough to dodge real consequences, then fade back into the shadows the moment no one's looking. But there was one person who had to deal with him day after day. First Sergeant Alvarez. That man was a wall. Years in the game, decorated, respected by every soldier on the floor. He didn't talk much, but when he did, you shut up and listened. I'd seen him carry Bravo Company through more than one close call, but behind closed doors, I could see the weight on his shoulders growing. Briggs treated First Sergeant Alvarez like an errand boy, dumped work on him, ignored his counsel, took credit for wins, blamed him for failures. Mike and I would trade looks across the hallway sometimes, like, is this guy for real? But it was the way Alvarez started dragging his boots in the morning that told me something had shifted. Then came the week, or should I say the week and a half. 13 days. That's how long Briggs was missing. No call, no email, no explanation, just gone. Bravo Company ran without him, which ironically meant it ran better. But that absence, it lit something in Mike's eyes. Not rage, not frustration, something colder. Precision. He stopped by my office on the 3rd day of Briggs's disappearance. Didn't knock, just walked in. You ever sheetrock a doorway, Keller? I blinked. You mean like in construction? He smiled. Not a happy smile, a planning smile. I'm thinking about renovating the command suite. I didn't ask any more questions, but I knew exactly what he meant. That weekend, we had a 4-day Liberty Pass. Most folks went home, hit the bars, got some much-needed sleep. Not Mike, not First Sergeant Alvarez. Those two stayed behind, armed with drywall, paint, spackle, and a level of petty vengeance that could make a saint smile. Because what do you do when the only person responsible for leading your soldiers acts like he's above even showing up?
The thing about revenge, especially the smart kind, it doesn't scream. It whispers. And Mike wasn't just whispering. He was planning. I didn't see him much over that 4-day weekend. Just glimpses, passing through the hall with a bucket of joint compound under one arm, a level in the other. Calm, quiet, focused, like a man building something sacred. First Sergeant Alvarez was right there beside him, in civvies, work gloves, no rank, no salute, just two soldiers fed up. They didn't touch anything except the company office, Bravo's section of the hallway. But what they did in that time? That was the most beautiful act of subtle sabotage I'd ever seen. They sheetrocked over Captain Briggs' office door. Seamless. Painted it to match the rest of the hallway. Perfectly flush, no visible handle. Like the door had never existed. And when they were done, they repainted the entire hallway. Not just a patch job, every inch. Trim, corners, even the damn bulletin board got a new coat. It looked official, like something the battalion commander himself had ordered. And the best part? They did it all by regulation. No profanity, no graffiti, no defacement. Just clean, sharp, Army-approved modification. Monday morning rolled in, and so did Captain Briggs. Late, of course, 10:47 a.m. by my watch. I happened to be walking by the hallway when I saw him, standing in front of where his office used to be, staring at the wall. Not panicked, just confused. He turned to one of the specialists walking by. "Where's my office?" The kid didn't even blink. "Your what, sir?" "My office," he repeated. "I'm the company commander." The specialist just tilted his head. "I thought First Sergeant was the acting commander, sir. You, retired or something?" Briggs looked like someone had slapped him with a wet rag. And that was just the beginning. Over the next 2 hours, the entire company played along. It was like watching a gaslight operation unfold in real time. "Captain who? I thought you were with Battalion. Weren't you the finance guy?" One of the junior NCOs even said, with a straight face, "Sir, are you lost?" I had to duck into my office just to keep from laughing. But make no mistake, this wasn't about humor. This was war. Silent, bloodless, tactical war. Briggs stomped up and down the hall for an hour, talking to anyone who would listen. He demanded someone restore his office. He barked about chain of command, but no one reacted. No one acknowledged he even had a space. By noon, he looked like a man unraveling. And that's when he made his first real mistake. He barged into Mike's office. Now remember, Mike had technically been his XO. Not anymore. Mike leaned back in his chair, mid-email, calm as a Sunday. "Can I help you, sir?" he asked. Briggs gestured wildly behind him. "My office! It's gone!" Mike raised an eyebrow. "Sir, that wall's been like that since I arrived here. You sure you're not thinking of another building?" I swear, he even pulled up a blueprint. A blueprint, for God's sake. One of the admin clerks had modified it over the weekend. No trace of a commander's office. Just blank space. "This is insane! Where's the battalion commander? I'm reporting this!" And right on cue, in walks First Sergeant Alvarez. Calm, stoic, a clipboard under one arm. "Sir, battalion's in a meeting, but I can pass your concern up if you'd like." "Concern? Concern? My damn office is missing!" Alvarez paused, looked him dead in the eyes. "Sir, I think maybe you need to lie down. You're not making sense." The whole hallway went still. That was the moment, the psychological turning point, when Briggs realized this wasn't incompetence. This was organized, orchestrated, and he had no clue who was behind it. He stormed out of the building, red-faced, muttering threats no one listened to. I watched him from the stairwell, and for the first time in months, I felt something shift in that building. A breath of fresh air, the silence after a storm. But we weren't done, not even close. Because if you think painting a wall is revenge, just wait until you see what came next.
After Briggs stormed out of the building that afternoon, we all expected him to come back swinging. He didn't. Not that day. Not the next. It was almost like he was regrouping, like the confusion had bruised his ego harder than we thought. But on day 3, that's when the real paranoia set in. He started showing up earlier than anyone had seen him in months. Pacing the hallway like a man looking for ghosts. He'd stop people in the break room. He'd ask pointed questions. Who painted the hallway? When did they renovate? Have you seen the facilities request? But no one gave him a straight answer. Not because they were told to lie, but because at this point, no one wanted him back. The company had run better in his absence, more efficient, more disciplined. Morale had lifted like a fog was gone. Even the junior soldiers had picked up on it, the kind of psychological freedom that happens when bad leadership leaves the room. And so the company kept up the game, not out of fear, but out of loyalty. Loyalty to each other, loyalty to Alvarez, loyalty to the idea that maybe, just maybe, things could be better. Briggs hated it. You could see it eating at him. He couldn't confront Mike, not without proof. And Alvarez? That man could lie with the face of a granite statue. He'd answer every question with, "I'm not sure, sir," or "We'd have to check with maintenance." Nothing direct. No insubordination, just enough fog to make Briggs question his own memory. And eventually, that fog turned inward. I overheard him in the stairwell one morning, talking to himself. Did I miss a memo? Was there a plan to move my office? He even called building facilities, filed a ticket. I saw the report, possible structural error, missing office. They closed it in under 10 minutes. No record of any office ever existing in that space. That was the turning point. Because once Briggs realized the system wouldn't back him, he turned inward. His uniform started looking sloppier, his hair out of reg. He wasn't just unraveling anymore. He was deteriorating. On Friday, he tried to call a formation. Told Bravo Company to meet outside the building at 0700 sharp. Nobody showed up. And it wasn't defiance. No one even knew he'd called it. He never ran it by Alvarez, never issued it through channels, just assumed his word still held weight. It didn't. Not anymore. Later that morning, I found him in the lobby, arms crossed, waiting for soldiers who would never come. "They're insubordinate," he mumbled to me. I didn't respond. I just kept walking. Because at that point, he was talking like a ghost. Like someone who didn't realize they were already gone. That afternoon, he did something I never thought I'd see from him. He walked into battalion headquarters, straight into the BC's office. Colonel Raymond hadn't spoken much about Briggs in recent months. He was a practical man, preferred numbers to noise. And to him, Bravo Company had been improving. Numbers were up, reports on time, morale stable. But now here was Briggs, red-faced, sweaty, half shouting about invisible renovations and a company-wide conspiracy. And when Colonel Raymond asked for evidence, Briggs had none. No photos, no documentation, no work orders. Just a blank wall. A hallway so polished and pristine, it looked like it had been that way for years. That weekend, battalion sent someone to evaluate. A quiet captain from S4, clipboard in hand. He walked the hallway, took a few notes, didn't say much. Then he asked a single question. "Has this wall always been here?" Mike looked up from his desk. "Yes, sir. Ever since I took over as acting commander." That was the first time those words had been said out loud. Acting commander. The guy nodded, scribbled something down, and left. That night, Briggs didn't go home. He stayed in the office building until after midnight. We knew because the motion sensors picked him up. I imagined him running his fingers along the wall, searching for seams that weren't there, looking for proof that his memory wasn't lying to him. But memory is a tricky thing, especially when everyone around you says you're wrong. And when you're not liked, when you've alienated everyone beneath you, you don't get a benefit of the doubt. You get silence. The kind of silence that screams the truth you don't want to hear. You are no longer in command. And the Army, it doesn't wait for ghosts.
The Army doesn't do subtle. It's loud, rigid, full of paperwork and protocol and people who think a PowerPoint slide can replace a conversation. That's why what happened next worked so damn well, because no one ever expects subtlety in a place built for blunt force. The following Monday, a rumor started drifting through the building. Just a whisper at first. Someone had filed a complaint with IG, Inspector General, anonymously, about Bravo Company's toxic leadership culture. Nobody named names, but you didn't have to. The implication was clear. Briggs. Normally, that kind of rumor would ignite panic. But this time, people nodded. Like they'd been waiting for it. Like justice was finally threading its boots. Even Briggs looked rattled when he heard. You could see it in his eyes. A flicker of fear he couldn't hide behind his usual smug scowl. But here's the twist. There was no IG complaint. Not really. That was the red herring. Mike and Alvarez had floated the rumor themselves. Quietly, carefully, surgically. They never said it directly. Just let it slip to a few choice people. The kind of soldiers who loved to gossip, always in the smoke pit or hanging by the vending machines. Heard someone's going to IG. You didn't hear it from me, but someone's had enough of Briggs. Word spreads fast in a closed unit. Faster than orders. Faster than truth. And once that little seed was planted, Briggs started to wilt. Every email he sent was more paranoid than the last. He started CCing people he hadn't spoken to in months. Battalion staff, division clerks, even legal. Trying to clarify old decisions. Trying to retroactively justify his actions. But the more he explained, the guiltier he looked. And while he chased ghosts, Mike and Alvarez executed Phase 2. The wall had been symbolic, but this next move, it was surgical. They started rearranging office assets, slowly, deliberately. Briggs's old nameplate disappeared from the supply locker. His digital signature was quietly removed from routine documents. Mike began holding daily huddles in what used to be Briggs's office, now claimed, sealed, and forgotten. Staff started referring to Mike as Sir, and not one soldier corrected it. Not one. Because at some point, the title just transferred. Unofficially, quietly, but completely. It's funny how command isn't always a formal thing. Sometimes it's just presence. Being there when it matters. Briggs was still on paper as command commander, but he might as well have been a ghost. And Alvarez? He was the quiet force making it all happen. He never once raised his voice, never issued a direct challenge. He simply redirected gravity. Staff came to him for decisions. NCOs brought him reports. And when someone asked who they should check with on a training issue, Alvarez would shrug and say, "Acting XO can give you the green light." Not Briggs. Not Sir. The walls were closing in, slowly, quietly, and with terrifying precision. And Briggs? He started making mistakes. He tried to call a company-wide safety brief. He didn't tell Alvarez, didn't coordinate with anyone. So when he stood in the company area at 1600 waiting to speak, he was completely alone. No one showed. 30 minutes passed. He stood there, sweating under his uniform, trying not to look lost. Eventually, a private walked by with a box of printer paper. "Sir, you waiting for someone?" Briggs just stared at him. Like a man on a deserted island finally seeing a boat, only to realize it was a hallucination. Later that week, he tried to reset passwords, access his own command email. Locked out. IT claimed it was a security issue. System auto-disabled for inactivity. But we knew. Everyone knew. Briggs wasn't losing his mind. He was losing his command. Inch by inch. Eroded by competence. Suffocated by silence. Replaced not by rebellion, but by efficiency. Mike and Alvarez didn't shout or scheme or raise fists. They simply ran the company better than Briggs ever did. And eventually, that became impossible to ignore, even for Battalion. Especially for Battalion. Because when numbers go up, when reports are on time, when troops stop complaining, no one questions the method. They just ask who's in charge. And when the answer isn't the person with the official title, that's when the hammer drops.
If you've ever watched someone fall from power slowly, you know it doesn't happen all at once. It's not some grand explosion. It's 1,000 little cuts, most of them self-inflicted. By this point, Captain Briggs wasn't even pretending to lead anymore. He just lingered, wandering the halls, trying to insert himself into conversations he was no longer invited to.
He'd hover near briefings, lean on door frames, squint at documents like he was trying to decode some conspiracy. And the more he tried to claw back control, the more irrelevant he became. Then battalions started asking questions. Not the kind Briggs was hoping for, not what happened to your office, not who's undermining you, but questions like, who signed off on last week's range qualification? Why is Bravo's maintenance readiness 100% for the first time in 8 months? Who updated the counseling tracker? And every answer came back to Mike or First Sergeant Alvarez. Briggs wasn't on anything. And that was when battalions started digging, quietly. They didn't send an investigator, didn't announce an inquiry. No. They sent Captain Renner from S3. Renner was sharp, dry, professional to the point of being surgical, the kind of guy who could interrogate you with a spreadsheet. He came under the pretense of a routine staff assistance visit. Translation, we're watching. I saw him in the hallway midweek, clipboard tucked tight against his chest, walking beside Mike. He didn't ask dumb questions. He asked precision questions. Who's reviewing training plans? Who's listed as company commander in DTMS? Who's signing leave packets? And every time, Mike gave the same calm, respectful answer. That's routed through me, sir. Renner didn't blink, didn't flinch. He just scribbled something down and moved on. Then he sat down with First Sergeant Alvarez. That meeting lasted almost an hour. No raised voices, no accusations, just slow, methodical note-taking and a quiet nod at the end. When Renner left, he didn't speak to Briggs. Not a word. That's when Briggs finally cracked. I was walking back from supply when I heard the yelling. His office, or what used to be his office, was still just a wall, but he'd started posting up in the corner of the break room like a squatter king. And now he was on the phone. Loud. Angry. No one's listening to me anymore. They're cutting me out. My XO and First Sergeant are conspiring against me. There was a pause, then quieter. I'm not paranoid. This is real. That last word stuck with me. Real. Because in Briggs' mind, everything was still real. He still believed rank guaranteed loyalty. Still believed position gave him power. But here's the thing. In the Army, you don't lead by title. You lead by presence. And Briggs, he hadn't been present for months. His absence had created a vacuum. And Mike and Alvarez, they hadn't filled it with rebellion. They'd filled it with competence. Quiet, professional, undeniable. Even Battalion couldn't ignore it. Especially not after Renner's visit. That Friday, a calendar update dropped on everyone's inbox. Subject, Bravo Company Command Climate Survey. Mandatory. Normally these surveys are a joke. Boxes to check, anonymous suggestions no one reads. But this time, there was a battalion rep present. And not just Renner. The command sergeant major showed up. When the senior enlisted in the battalion walks into your company meeting, you pay attention. He stood in the back while the soldiers filed in, quiet, arms crossed, just listening. And the things those troops said, let's just say, they weren't subtle. First time I've actually been led in this unit. Morale's the best it's ever been. The acting commander actually shows up. No one named Briggs. But he didn't need to be named. He was the silence in every sentence, the ghost they were all finally free of. And right then, something became clear to everyone in the room. Bravo Company had moved on. They'd already buried their old commander. The only person who hadn't accepted it yet was Briggs. After the meeting, the command sergeant major pulled Mike aside. Didn't speak long, just a pat on the shoulder, a nod, and a sentence that would change everything.
Appreciate you keeping the unit together, Lieutenant. We'll handle the rest. When Briggs came in Monday morning, there was a sealed envelope on his desk. Not his desk, just a folding table someone had left in the break room. Inside were orders. He was being reassigned, effective immediately, relieved of command. No fanfare, no hearing, just a line of text signed off by the battalion commander due to a loss of confidence in leadership capability. And just like that, the wall didn't need to exist anymore, because the man behind it was finally gone.
Monday morning was unusually quiet, even for an Army office on the backside of a long con. No barking NCOs, no radios crackling, just the fluorescent hum of lights and the occasional shuffle of boots down a hallway that now belonged to someone else. Briggs walked in like he always did, head high, jaw tight, trying to look in charge. But there was something different this time. He wasn't scanning the room for problems. He was looking for recognition, for someone, anyone, to acknowledge he still mattered. No one did. Not the junior soldiers who nodded at Mike and walked past him, not the admin clerk who left his name off the morning sign-in sheet, and definitely not Alvarez. The first sergeant walked by with a stack of folders under one arm, paused, and simply said, "Sir." Flat. Neutral. Professional. But it cut deep, because Alvarez had never been neutral. Not until Briggs became irrelevant. Then it happened. The confrontation. Briggs stormed into the training office, slapped the manila envelope onto Mike's desk, and snapped, "Did you do this?" Mike didn't flinch. He looked up, calmly, like he'd been expecting it. "Do what, sir?" Briggs pointed at the orders. "I've been removed from command." "Yes, sir. I saw the email." "Don't play stupid with me." "Not playing, just staying in my lane." There it was, another subtle knife. No accusations, just the soft implication that Briggs hadn't stayed in his. "You think you won?" Briggs growled. Mike stood up, slowly, taller than Briggs by 2 inches and made of calm defiance. "It was never about winning, sir. It was about leadership." Briggs stepped forward, fists clenched. For a second, I thought he might throw a punch, but Mike didn't blink. "We needed someone who shows up, who listens, who doesn't blame everyone else when things go sideways." "I'm still a captain," Briggs snapped. "You're a captain, but you haven't been a commander in a long time." Silence. Deafening. Then Alvarez appeared in the doorway, like a bouncer in a suit of command presence. "Sir, battalion's expecting you. Vehicles waiting out front." Briggs looked between them. 2 men who used to answer to him, now standing like pillars of a company that had outgrown him. He grabbed the envelope off the desk, shoved it under his arm, and walked out without another word. I watched through the window as he stepped into the GOV. Door closed, engine started, and just like that, he was gone. No salutes, no goodbyes, just a quiet ending to a loud failure. And in his place, a company run by leaders who earned their respect, not demanded it. That day, Bravo Company didn't just get a new commander, it got its soul back. It was the kind of Monday morning that carries a weight in the air you can't shake off, like the calm before a storm that's been brewing for weeks. And no one felt it more than me and Mike, the other XO, standing side by side in the hollowed-out hallway of Bravo Company. The hallway was still sealed off by that sheetrock wall, a silent monument to everything that had gone wrong and everything that was about to change. 4 companies shared that long stretch of fluorescent-lit linoleum floors and dingy bulletin boards. A place once full of noise, commands, and constant movement now felt oddly hollow, almost sacred. Mike's eyes scanned the empty corridor. "It feels different without him," he said quietly. "Yeah," I replied, "like a ghost just left the building." We both knew the truth. Captain Briggs wasn't gone because he wanted to be. He was gone because he had to be. Because he was no longer welcome here. Not in this company. Not in this battalion. But the best part? None of it had happened by accident. Mike and First Sergeant Alvarez had orchestrated every move with military precision, like a game of chess, where every piece was accounted for. Every step planned, every reaction predicted. It all came down to this final act, the trap they had set that Briggs walked right into. The battalion commander wanted results. He wanted the unit to perform. But more than that, he wanted the truth. A commander couldn't lead if his soldiers didn't respect him, and respect was earned, never demanded. Weeks ago, Mike had started collecting evidence. Not the kind you file away in a report, but the quiet proof of leadership. Training schedules kept flawlessly, soldiers who were engaged. Morale that, for the first time, felt real. Meanwhile, Briggs was crumbling. The absence of accountability, the missed deadlines, the endless blame game, those cracks widened every day. And Mike had the patience to wait. When the battalion sent Captain Renner for a routine visit, Mike was ready. He handed over every record, every training roster, every counseling form signed and submitted on time. Renner didn't find chaos. He found order. And that was the beginning of the end for Briggs. But the trap, the real trap, was social. Mike and Alvarez knew the soldiers wanted leadership they could believe in. So they coached the troops without ever explicitly saying it. Subtle nods, quiet conversations, a united front that said, "We are the company now." When Briggs finally returned after nearly 2 weeks of absence, he was met with a silence colder than any winter morning. No salutes, no greetings, just blank faces. Mike had told me later, it was one of the hardest moments of his life, watching the man who had failed his soldiers walk into a company that had turned its back on him. Then came the sheetrock. The night they worked through the 4-day weekend to seal his office shut, to erase his presence physically and symbolically, was a moment of psychological warfare executed perfectly. The hallway was repainted. The new wall stood firm, and every soldier who passed it acted as if Briggs was a ghost. It wasn't just defiance, it was reclaiming dignity, reclaiming control. Briggs tried everything to break it. Phone calls to battalion, blaming Mike and Alvarez for conspiracy, but the battalion wasn't buying it because they saw what Mike and Alvarez had built. That silence, that rejection, was louder than any accusation. By the time the battalion commander stepped in to relieve Briggs, the trap had sprung fully. But here's the twist. Mike and Alvarez never wanted Briggs humiliated. They wanted justice. They wanted to save their company from a leader who had given up on his own soldiers. That's why when the official orders came down, Mike was calm, because he knew the company would be fine, because he was ready. And I was right there beside him, watching a company heal itself in real time. When Briggs left, the office door was no longer just a door. It was a symbol, a reminder that leadership is earned through respect, presence, and accountability. That day, we all learned that true power in the Army doesn't come from rank. It comes from those who fight to protect the people they lead, even if it means tearing down the old guard to do it. And sometimes, the best revenge is simply showing up. The days after Briggs left felt surreal. like waking up from a long nightmare only to find the morning was real, but still uncertain. For weeks, the company had been holding its breath, waiting to see what would come next. Would there be chaos? Would old loyalties fracture the unit? Would bitterness fester like an untreated wound? None of that happened. Instead, something unexpected took root. A quiet resilience, a slow rebuilding. The soldiers who once shuffled nervously under Briggs' absent gaze now stood taller. They spoke openly in meetings, took initiative during training, smiled at each other again. Mike and First Sergeant Alvarez stepped up without fanfare. No grand speeches, no declarations of "we saved the day." Just steady, consistent leadership. The kind that doesn't need applause. But the fallout wasn't just about Bravo Company's revival. It was about what happened to Briggs, the man who had been at the center of this storm. Rumors swirled through the battalion. Some said he'd been reassigned to a desk job miles away from troops. Others whispered about a formal investigation still underway. A few even speculated if he'd resign altogether. The truth, as usual, was somewhere in between. Battalion command kept him on a short leash, limited his responsibilities, kept him out of any direct leadership roles for the foreseeable future. It was a fall from grace few saw coming, but many, in hindsight, had been waiting for. The soldiers I spoke with after that day were honest. Many admitted relief, some even gratitude. Not for Briggs, but for what came after. "We finally feel like we're being led again," one private told me quietly. "Like someone cares." That's when it hit me. Leadership isn't about rank, ribbons, or orders. It's about presence, about showing up physically, mentally, emotionally. And when that fails, no title can save you. For Mike, the aftermath was bittersweet. He'd won the battle, but at what cost? He didn't celebrate, he didn't gloat. Instead, he took on the challenge of healing the scars left behind, rebuilding trust, restoring morale. And I saw something else in him, something rare in the military world: humility. He never asked for credit, never sought glory. He just did the hard work. Watching Mike and Alvarez in those weeks, I understood the true meaning of leadership. It's not about being the loudest voice in the room. It's about being the steady hand when everything else is falling apart. But even as Bravo Company moved forward, the memory of that wall, the sheetrock that sealed Briggs' office, remained. It was a symbol of accountability, a reminder that no one, no matter how high their rank, is above responsibility. That wall eventually came down, but the lesson it represented stayed with us. Battalion leadership made it clear. This wasn't just a disciplinary action, it was a statement, a precedent, a message to every soldier that to lead is to serve. Looking back, I realize that day marked a turning point, not just for Bravo Company, but for all of us. Because sometimes the hardest battles aren't fought on the front lines. They're fought in boardrooms, offices, and hallways, in the quiet moments where courage meets conviction. And sometimes the best revenge isn't destruction, it's restoration. It's reclaiming what was lost, rebuilding what was broken. That's the story of how a company tore down a toxic leader without firing a single bullet, and how in doing so, they found something far more valuable: respect, trust, and hope. The dust settled.
The quiet aftermath of a battle no one saw coming. Briggs was gone. The hallway was restored. And Bravo Company, scarred but unbroken, was finally whole again. But here's the truth no one tells you about revenge. It's not just about the act. It's about the message, the shift, the reclaiming of power, not through violence or chaos, but through resilience and unity. In those weeks after the dust settled, I watched something remarkable happen. Mike, the other XO, the mastermind behind the quiet rebellion, didn't bask in victory. He didn't parade around like a general returning from war. No. He was the calm eye in the storm, steady and sure. He knew the fight wasn't over. Not really. Revenge isn't a single moment. It's a journey. And the real payoff is in what comes after. That sheetrock wall that had sealed off Briggs' office, it was more than just drywall and paint. It was a physical boundary, a barrier between what was and what would be. When Battalion gave the order to remove it, we gathered as a company. Soldiers from every rank stood together, watching as the wall came down, piece by piece, inch by inch. With each knock of the hammer, I saw more than rubble falling away. I saw old wounds healing. I saw respect rebuilding. I saw a company reclaiming its identity. That moment felt like a rebirth. Because what we'd done wasn't just a practical joke or petty retaliation. It was a lesson. To every leader who forgets their duty and every soldier who feels powerless, that change is possible. That toxic leadership can be challenged. That respect must be earned. That a company isn't just a collection of soldiers, it's a family. And families protect each other. Briggs's removal sent ripples through the battalion. Other units took notice. Other commanders started watching their own leadership styles a little more closely. Because if a company could stand up like that, so quietly, so deliberately, then maybe nothing was untouchable. For me, the most powerful moment came weeks later. The battalion commander called Mike and me into his office. He was a man of few words, but that day, he looked at us with something rare. Respect. He said, "You two did good work. No theatrics, no drama, just leadership." I could tell he wasn't just talking about Briggs. He was acknowledging something bigger. The way a company can heal itself from the inside out. And the hardest part? Knowing we'd done it without ever breaking a rule. Every move Mike made was calculated, careful. No insubordination, no direct confrontation. Just pure, tactical leadership and a deep understanding of human nature. That's what made it brilliant. The 1SG, Alvarez, was equally quiet about his role too. But his presence was felt everywhere, in every well-run formation, in every smooth mission, in every soldier who finally felt seen. Together, they proved a fundamental truth. Leadership isn't about power or position. It's about service. And when those at the top fail, the people below can and will step up. I'm proud to say I was there, to witness a company reclaim itself, to watch good men lead with integrity, to see justice served not with fists, but with resolve. That's the story of how Bravo Company tore down a toxic commander, with nothing but courage, unity, and a wall of drywall.
Sometimes the loudest message is the one that comes in silence. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this story of leadership, justice, and clever revenge, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. And remember, true leadership always finds a way.